Hi, everyone. This is a poet's introduction, not a news story, but it's got a lead, and I don't want to bury it. The lead is this, that actions in our state capital, certain capital offenses chewed and digested, have rippled their way to the poems that our reader tonight, our poet at large, brought to 3,000 students in 5 sessions over the last 2 days at high schools near here. What actions? Only yesterday morning, our poet reminded auditoriumfuls about blackface, opening for students on a big screen an ancient primer on the technique of blacking up, the burning of corks, the grinding of them into powder, the adding to them of petroleum jelly, and the application onto the skin. Quote, so easy for gentlemen and ladies too. Then this morning at breakfast, our poet read the New York Times. The times which aren't a-changing, not enough. Even before the object lesson, we knew our man's poems are news that stays. For 7 years, he was devoted to the daily work of recovering personal histories from previous centuries, histories that resonate personally now for him and for us, for readers of the times. What he made them of was olio, a chronicling in poetry, part performance, part documentary, part eavesdrop, part blueprint, in new forms that first engage the reader's volition, which you will see, and then step out from the sewn sections into volumes that stand and deliver, which you will see. To encounter these poems is to remember that their speakers, Blind Boone, Box Brown, the McKay sisters, Edmonia Lewis, each of them troubled this actual air with larynx and embouchure, with sound waves that are rippling out yet, diminished but factual toward ultima thule, and that the sensibility, the instrument that catches and renders and returns them to us, must be very fine indeed. Indeed it is, and prescient too. Tyehimba Jess is a native of Detroit who lives and teaches now in New York City. His first book, Leadbelly, won the National Poetry Series. Olio, his second collection, won the Pulitzer Prize. It's with great pleasure and gratitude, Tyehimba, that we welcome you to our stage tonight.
Yeah. What's up, Florida? Palm Beach. I finally made it to Palm Beach. I've been reading about this festival for years, y'all. So it is a real pleasure to be here. And thanks to all of you for bringing me here and letting me get a break from the New York weather. And also giving me the opportunity to share some poems, both with you and yes, with many, many high school students today. That I met a lot of aspiring writers, a lot of creative folks, and it was great being back in a high school again and catching a high schoolers ear. I wanna begin today in the fashion that I began with my high school students, because yes, this was the headline that I shared with them today. The Secretary of State of the state of Florida resigned today because some pictures were unearthed of him in blackface in the year 2005, 2 months after Katrina devastated the city of New Orleans. And he actually came dressed not just in blackface, but as a survivor of the Katrina catastrophe. This is what he considered to be merriment, directly as they were still unearthing bodies from the streets and the homes and the rivers of the city of New Orleans. And so I told the students that I met today that yes, I am talking about history. But when you're writing about history, it often has a tendency to mirror itself in the present. speaking from the past and into the present and foretelling or indicating things we need to be wary of in the future, right? So, and then I went on and talked about Catherine Harris and all that. In the 2000 election, I got on a tear. Then I had to kind of bring myself back in and reel it in, Jess. But I think that is a fitting way to start this particular reading, because this did just happen today, and the theme of Olio, the backdrop, I should say, of Olio is the minstrel show. Here's the cover of the book, right? So the backdrop of Olio is the minstrel show, and the theme of Olio is the struggle for African American artists to realize themselves and their potential against the backdrop of a form of psychological warfare, in particular, demonstrated by the minstrel show, that was evinced also through the law, because the very first character of the minstrel show was called Jim Crow, and we know that Jim Crow was the name of the segregation laws in the United States. So here's the cover. Cover came about because I actually had really fancy ideas for title, for cover art and whatnot. But guess what? My publisher does not do cover art. So, but it actually fitted with one of the themes of the book, which is constraint. Not being able to do everything that you want to do, having to go into a particular form, or having to do without. And in this case, we have Olio, which is trying to look like a face or a mask at one point, but also reads in different directions. We have Olio, we have Olio, we have Olio, right? And we have Olio, etc., going in different directions, which is to introduce the reader to some of the concepts in the book. So as I was saying, minstrelsy was started in the history is it started in the 1820s or so. It was white actors putting on blackface to make fun of, to belittle black people, blackface, tattered clothes, broken speech, in order to belittle black folks. It continued throughout the 19th century up into the 20th. The Olio was the middle part of the minstrel show. And it consisted of a variety of acts. It could be a juggler, it could be a singer, a piano player, a comedian, all kind of meshed together. And towards the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, the minstrel show kind of faded away. And vaudeville, Olio kind of evolved. The Olio was left and it evolved into vaudeville. So the minstrel show is at the very root of American theater. And I did not really intend exactly to get to research the minstrel show as much as I did. I was really initially interested in the history of black music before the era of recording, but it's impossible to escape the influence of the minstrel show and the weight that it carried. Against or through all of the art forms that I was encountering. So, that said, in Olio, we have a variety of performers. We have piano players. We have some members of a freak show. We have a sculptor. We have an opera singer. We have a spiritual choir. We have all of these folks gathered together to tell their stories. And I'd like to tell some of those stories with you today. Is that cool? All right, fantastic, because that's what I was going to do anyway. So the first folks I want to introduce you to are Millie and Christine McCoy. They were sisters. They were twin sisters. They were not just twin sisters, they were pygopagus twins, meaning they were joined essentially from the bottom of the rib cage all the way through the pelvis. Very, very, very rare medical condition. I think historically there had only been maybe one or two other accounts of surviving Pygopicus twins, and those surviving Pygopicus twins did not live as long as the McCoy twins. These ladies lived until their 60s, right? They're very, very rare to come across them, and they were born into slavery in 1849 in the state of North Carolina. And when I heard about their story, it seemed there were so many questions that I had. How did they survive slavery? How did they survive the years after slavery? On the other side of the coin, what were the decisions that their master made in order to do what slavery does and make a profit from the dehumanization of human beings? How did that happen? What was the story? So I wanted to create some poems that would answer that, and here is the first of those poems. Here it is, Millie and Christine McCoy. This is a sonnet. Is that big enough? I know my eyes are not as good as they used to be. So I'm going to make it as big as I can. There you go. So this is the first poem that I was able to come up with in this series about Millie and Christine McCoy. For you sonnet lovers, here you go. 2 for the price of 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a syncopated sonnet in which 2 voices both have their own distinct tale but also merge together in the middle to tell a conjoined tale. And if we read down the middle of this poem, we find their conjoined voices, and on the other side we have their individual voices. So reading down the middle, we're fused in blood and body from one thrumbed stem, budding twin blooms of Saul. We're a double rose grown from hard labor that made our mother shout, spent with awe. We hymn to pay soft homage, born of and beyond the flesh. We are just 2 women singing truths we can't forget. And if you look at Millie's side of the poem, we've mended 2 songs into one dark skin, bleeding soprano into contralto, descended from raw carnage of the South, bursting open our freedom. We sing past rage to the work song's aria. It leaves us soaked in history like our father's sweat from plantation to grave. Lord, here we are, free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far. And on Christine's side of the poem, we ride the wake of each other's rhythm, beating our hearts syncopated tempo with the music all our own. With our mouths seeped in the glow of hand-me-down courage, drenched in spiritual acapellas, flowing soul from bone through skin. We pay debts from broken chattel to circus stars. We sing straight from this nation's barbed-wired heart. And of course, because they're appearing together and they're sharing this story together, it can also be read across and down. So they share the same story, going, we've mended 2 songs into one dark skin. We ride the wake of each other's rhythm, bleeding soprano into contralto, beating our hearts syncopated tempo. We're fused in blood and body from one thrum stem, budding twin blooms of Saul. We're a double rose, descended from raw carnage of the South, with a music all our own, with our mouths bursting open our freedom. We sing past rage, seeped in the glow of hand-me-down courage, grown from hard labor that made our mother shout, spent with awe. We hymn to pay soft homage to the work song's aria. It leaves us drenched in spiritual acapellas, soaked in history like our father's sweat, flowing soul from bone through skin. We pay debts born of and beyond the flesh. We are just 2 women singing truths we can't forget from plantation to grave. Lord, here we are from broken chattel to circus stars, free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far. We sing straight from this nation's barbed-wired heart. Thank you. So, this was the first that I was able to construct for the McCoy twins, but I wanted to delve further into their story. And turns out that I was interested in what these decisions were, how these decisions were made, what their master decided to do with these products born on his plantation. Was he going to have them in the field chopping cane? Was he going to have him in the house, polishing silver and answering the door? He decided that neither of those would be profitable enough. So what he decided to do was to take these girls at the age of about 13, 14 months, after they were weaned, and take them and rent them out to a freak show, a traveling freak show. They went from town to town, village to village, burg to burg, county to county, showing off the amazing Pygopagus twins, a wonder never seen in these parts before. Right? And the proprietor of the freak show would make 5 cents here, 10 cents there, 25 cents, and get much more wealth than the owner would have gotten if they had just stayed on the plantation. The other part of this was that because they were so rare, because they were such a medical miracle, people doubted that they were actually Pygopagus twins. Especially men of medicine and scientists who were eager to not just inspect the package, but to inspect it thoroughly in the rudest possible fashion in every town that they went into. So this happened, they were inspected over and over and over and over and over again, from city to city, town to town, village to village, throughout their youth, from the age of about 14 to 15 months, throughout their childhood, as they were on display, proving the fact that they were Pygopagus twins. This happened throughout their childhood until they were emancipated after the Civil War. And then they got affidavits that swore to the fact that they were indeed Pygopagus twins. And they no longer had to be subjected to that kind of examination. So, I wanted to write a poem that talked about that, and here it is. The McCoy, Millie Christine on display. And if we read down the middle, once again, this is the same idea. This is a contrapuntal poem. 2 voices going counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, back and forth. This is also called stick-a-mythic poem, when you have one line of conversation going back and forth between 2 characters, right? And here we have Millie Christine on display. If we read down the middle, we find their conjoined voices. We count the blessings of our double shell as we pay our dues. We've proven ourselves for science. We've been taken town to town like prize bovine. We've been pawed up and down. Each sawbone has searched us from spine to loin. Our wondrous oneness exists. We're conjoined. We're not frauds, but born of providence. God mended 2 souls into one dark skin. And at this point, I'd like to introduce other aspects of the syncopated sonnet. To be honest, it kind of came as a surprise to me, and I just kind of capitalized on the surprise that I had when I finally figured this thing out, which was this. The reader can approach this poem from various directions. So, for instance, you might want to enter this poem from beneath. So, God mended 2 souls into one dark skin. We're not frauds, but born of providence. And we've lists of doctors who understand. We've been probed, prodded, and roughly examined from my twin's navel to between her thighs. Been photographed, half nude. Verified to those who doubt our form. We have performed with each breath. We prove we've endured faith's storm. We count the blessings of our double shell every time we rise to face the crowd's face on display. We've been richly, rudely paid to prove veracity. They've scanned each side and then back up, staring into my eyes from backbone to backbone, from hip to hip. Our miracle is real. Hear and see this. We're not frauds, but born of providence. God mended 2 souls into one dark skin. We're not frauds, but born of providence. Our wondrous oneness exists. We're conjoined. Each sawbone has searched us from spine to loin like prize bovine. We've been pawed up and down for science. We've been taken town to town as we pay our dues. We've proven ourselves. We count the blessings of our doubled shell. So the syncopated sonnets give the reader a kind of different kind of agency to go through the poems in the direction that they choose. Each line reads to every adjoining line. Now, turns out if you're the kind of guy that's going to take a couple of toddlers and take them around from village to village and subject them to the kind of probing and prodding and molestation of medical men around the country, you might not have the highest of morals. So, that was indeed the case of the proprietor of the freak show. What he decided to do was, instead of sharing his profits with the plantation owner, he said, look, I'm going to keep all this money for myself. How am I going to do that? I can't do that and stay in the United States because they'll just catch up with me. So what he decided to do was to kidnap these young girls, and this is one of 3 kidnappings that actually 3 and 1 metaphysical kidnapping that happens in this book. Right? Kidnap the girls and take them to Britain. And just start the whole show all over again, because Pygopagus twins are Pygopagus twins no matter where they go. Right? They're still an oddity, and an awesome one at that. And so that's what he did. He took them to England and started making bank, showing them off here and there all over London. So the question for their owner was this: how do I get my stolen property back? How do I get my profit center back on my plantation? His quandary was answered like this. He took their mother, her name was Monimia, went on a boat with her, sailed over to England, tracked down the twins. They were easy to find because they were being advertised and they were making a lot of money for the freak show owner. Tracked down the twins, walked into the place with their mother, and as soon as they saw their mother, what did they say? What any 2-year-old would say? Mommy. Right? And that was part of his proof of ownership over these young girls. Because if you own the slave, if you own the mother, you own the offspring of the mother. Right? That's what American slavery meant. You own not just the mother, but you own the whole family and the offspring. So, he had laid his claim. One wrinkle to this was that it was the year 1851. And in England at that time, slavery had been abolished in the country. So, the question for Monimia was this: I'm in a free country. I'm in a country where slavery has been abolished. Do I attempt to sue for my freedom and the freedom of my little girls and stay here in England and live out our days? Or do I go back to the United States, to North Carolina, where I have a husband and 5 other children, and remain in slavery, in bondage? Those were the queries and quandaries of the peculiar institution. The answer I want to resolve in this next poem. Millie Christine are kidnapped, and if we go down to the bottom, we see her solution. Straight into Dixie's rebellious mouth, our mother left England and went back south. Choosing between homeland and untold harms, torn between family or freedom's unknowns, we returned to a master we could trust. We went back to bondage in mother's arms. We sailed back to our Carolina home. We'd earned a London court sympathy, and thus, though we'd missed family, were we not blessed? Because of our great popularity, the thief's greed had set us free. Although bonded, we've been smuggled to freedom's soil, and yes, from slavery, we'd slipped into liberty. We've been stolen from mother and master, absconded like contraband. We've been shipped to Britain, imported by a scallywag agent at the age of 3. We've been kidnapped afar. We've been witted and sold, then snatched, taken like double dark treasures. Entertainment straight from America's barbed-wired heart at the age of 3. We've been kidnapped afar. We've been stolen from mother and master. Absconded, the thief's greed had set us free. Although bonded, we earned a London court sympathy, and thus we returned to a master we could trust. Our mother left England and went back south, straight into Dixie's rebellious mouth. There you go. So, now after they came back south, went back to the plantation, they stayed on the plantation. The Civil War started in 1861. 1865 met its conclusion. black folks across the country were emancipated. And they had the same question on their minds that thousands, millions of black folks had, which was, what am I going to do with my newfound freedom? What does this even mean anymore? What do I do to put food on my plate and shelter over my head? What kind of trade can I practice in order to make a dollar bill? Their answer was to do what they had been doing all along, which was to stay on the freak show circuit. But this time they had an affidavit that swore, or affidavits that swore to the fact that they were indeed Pygopagus twins, so they no longer had to be subjected to the kind of intimidating inspection that they had been subject to all their lives. So they set out to make their fortune, to see their way in freak shows. Now, along the way, they had become quite talented. They had learned 2 other languages. They learned English and French and German. They also learned to play instruments. So they played multiple instruments: violin, piano. They also so they had a little band going. They sang duets, of course, right? They wrote their own poetry and told their own story, right? And they were very popular. As a matter of fact, they started traveling around the country, around the United States, around the South and around the United States, and their popularity grew and grew and grew, and they traveled overseas again, and they started to perform overseas. And people were very impressed. And along with their fame came, of course, some francs, some pounds, some marks, right? Some cash, right? Which they were desperately in need of in order to make their fortune. What did they do? They were wise investors of their money, of their fortune. They saved some for themselves and for their travels and for their retirement. And then they were also generous and sent money back home to mom and dad back in North Carolina. And what their parents did with that money is they saved it, and then they brought inch by inch, yard by yard, acre by acre, they brought the plantation upon which they had been slaves. And that land is still in the McCoy family to this day. So, this poem is about that. I'm sorry. Here you go. Wait. Millie Christine by land. We're free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far. We're singing in drei Sprachen und machen es schwarz. That means roughly in German. We sing in 3 languages and make them all black. We speak more than one tongue. Wherever we roam, this gets pure gold while we travel the road with dimes hoarded by pension francs and pounds against servitude. We sing freedom bound with duets all mingled up to heaven. We bought land that once enslaved our parents with duets all mingled up to heaven, and we know the cost. We've overcome against servitude. We sing freedom bound from each gawking crowd. Meanwhile, dollars stack with dimes hoarded by pension francs and pounds. We pay mortgage on our old plantation. This gifts pure gold. While we travel the road, we earn respect. We give solid proof that we speak more than one tongue. Wherever we roam, nous avons chanté la français à Paris. We're singing in drei Sprachen machen es schwarz. We're certified global phenomena. We're free twin sisters who've hauled our voices far. Okay? So, thank you. So, there's one penultimate poem here, and that is just to capture the idea that the Millie and Christine were not forlorn about their circumstances on planet Earth. They were very proud of their accomplishments and of themselves and of their ability to earn their own way and make their own sense out of the world. So, this is Millie Christine's love story. Here we go. Millie Christine's love story, so follow along if you will. Here. This is our story I want you to hear. One body crooning 2 notes. By God, we're our own duet. Listen to how we're bound in unison. Listen to the grace we have ringing within me and my other half, airborne, shook and shimmering through my head like sympathetic strings. Each sung sound with Christine's voice at my side. I have sung in a way very few could comprehend, so you can see my life is brimmed. It's full with every breath we've got. I'm filled completely. I love my song and dancing family the way any other human would love, the way you love your own blood twice as much. I love this burden that we've been given. I've doubled the cause to celebrate life. I love my song and dancing family. I love this burden that we've been given to ride the shared wake of one blood's rhythm. I love this burden that we've been given. I've doubled the cause to celebrate life. I love my song and dancing family the way any other human would love. With every breath we've got, I'm filled completely in a way very few could comprehend. With Christine's voice at my side, I have sung with Millie's embracing contrapuntal, airborne, shook and shimmering through my head like sympathetic strings. Each sung sound ringing within me and my other half, one body crooning two notes. By God, we're our own duet. Listen to how we're bound in unison. Listen to the grace we have here. This is our story. I want you to hear. So, now, some of y'all write sonnets in here, I'm sure. Yes, how many sonnet writers we got up in here? Sonneteers in the house. All right, how many of y'all written a crown of sonnets? Crown of sonnets? Oh, you should give it a shot. It's a great way to tell a story, crown of sonnets. Well, you know what crown of sonnets is? Crown of sonnets is when you write one sonnet and the last line becomes the first line of the next sonnet, and the last line of that sonnet becomes the first line of the next sonnet, so on and so forth until the last line of the last sonnet is the first line of the first sonnet. That makes a circle, and that's why they call it a crown. Right? So there's a few crowns of sonnets in this book. And and that idea was on my mind for these poems, but it was a little too complicated to make that really happen. However, what I was able to do was to take this very first poem and take lines from the very beginning and the very end and pass them on. So we've made it two songs in the one dark skin. We ride the wake of each other's rhythm. We're free twin sisters who heart our voices far. We sing straight from this nation's barbed wire heart. All those lines appear in the other poems. So, for instance, you have in this poem, God amended two souls into one dark skin. In this next poem, we have straight from America's barbed wire heart. In this next poem, we have we're free twin sisters who've heard our voices far. And in this poem, we have to ride the shared wake of one blood's rhythm, right? So when you match those lines up and put them adjacent to each other, you end up with a poem that looks like this. There you go. And that is a star of syncopated sonnets. Couldn't get a circle, but I could get a star. So here we have the initial poem in the middle, and the other surrounding poems. And if you blow it up, you can see, right? God made two souls in one dark skin. We've made two songs in the one dark skin, etc. Right? To ride the shared wake of one blood's rhythm, we ride the wake of each other's rhythm, etc. Right? And we have we sing straight from the nation's barbed wire heart, and then straight from America's barbed wire heart. Right? And here we have free twin sisters who heard our voices far. We're free twin sisters who heard our voices far. So that means you can take this poem and you can start at the top, go all the way through the middle, go all the way down to the bottom, and then perhaps you want to go back up again. Perhaps you're going to go down again, and then perhaps you want to go back up again and all the way to the top and then down to the middle, whichever direction you decide to go. Right? Encountering the body of the poem the way one's eye would encounter the body of Millie and Christine McCoy gazing upon them on stage. Yes? Except in this case, enveloping or absorbing the story of the McCoy twins and not just their corporeal essence. Yes? So that's what you call a concrete poem. Right? Concrete poem takes the shape, mimics the shape of the subject of the poem. So you have two separate heads, a conjoined body, and two separate bases. There you go. And when you buy the book, no pressure. But in the book, you'll find that it folds out so that you can see the Star of Syncopated Sonnets in its entirety. And it's one thing I want readers of the book to do is to take it out of the book. It's perforated so that it tears perfectly out of the book. So you can have the McCoy twins on display wherever you would like to have them. Their story is telling itself on display. Okay? So I want readers to deconstruct the book in order to reconstruct the stories of the people in the book. Okay? Thank you. So, would you like to meet some other folks in the Olio? Fantastic, good. Now, there was some musical selections playing as you were getting seated and as you were getting ready for this presentation. And oh wait, my goodness, what time is it? I think I have just enough time to do this. But there were some musical selections playing. Among those selections, you heard there was some Scott Joplin, who's also in the book, Blind Boone, who's a piano player who lost his eyes, literally lost his eyes at the age of 6 months. Blind Tom, who was blind and autistic, their music was playing. Also was a famous song by a guy named Bert Williams. And the name of the song was Nobody. As a matter of fact, there was a version played by Cecile McLaurin-Savant, she's a fantastic singer. If you ever get a chance to hear her, she's a fantastic singer. Living right now. Also Nina Simone, also Johnny Cash covered this song by Bert Williams. And Bert Williams was part of a duo with George Walker. Here they are, very nattily dressed. Right? Bert Williams is the taller gentleman. George Walker is the cat that's with him. This is the way they dressed off stage. Okay? Because they were comedians. They were born in the mid-1870s. Okay? They were born comedians with comedic, with just that spirit. However, there was absolutely no way that they were going to have any kind of successful career in the field of comedy without being in the minstrel show. So that is exactly what they were. They were in a minstrel show. As a matter of fact, they were very successful as a minstrel show. They were part of the first wave of black comedians to actually wear the blackface. Okay, very touchy subject, I would say. However, their humor was a little. It was a little different humor. I'll give you a for instance. Their attitude was like this. Why go see a bunch of white folks in blackface when we can see some real black people entertain you? And thus that became their title. Why see fake coons when you can see two real coons? And that was literally the title of their show, right? So they were very successful. But they were successful not just because they made the audience laugh. W.C. Fields said that when he saw them, they were the only act that he saw that could make him laugh and cry in the same performance. So they were not just about buffoonery. They were about reaching beyond the caricature, the two-dimensional depiction of themselves. And as a matter of fact, they were so successful in their act that they were responsible beyond, they took it beyond the minstrel stage and were responsible for some of the very first African-American theater productions, independent African-American theater productions. So they were respected by the black community. Booker T. Washington used to go and see their shows. They were beloved. Right? Now, that's just a little bit of background, because now I just want to share with you another piece of work. Here you go. This is not my writing, but I found this book in the Brooklyn Public Library. It's a real book. I'm not inventive enough to make up this title. It's the Whitmark Amateur Minstrel Guide and Burnt Cork Encyclopedia, which is a handy-dandy guide for any American that might want to put on a minstrel show. I don't know, perhaps at your nursery school, perhaps at your office, perhaps at your church, perhaps at your elementary school, perhaps, in your high school, wherever. You need a guide to show you the ins and outs of a minstrel show and how it's really put on. So these are excerpts from that actual text, right? And you will note that it says, minstrelsy is the one American form of amusement purely our own. Right? That is the legacy of the minstrel show. Of course, there are instructions on how to black up, which I guess your Secretary of State paid some attention to. Right? Et cetera, et cetera. Now, on the flip side of this particular document, of this excerpt from the book, is the poem of Burt Williams and George Walker. I call it the Burt Williams-George Walker paradox. Okay? And here we have another poetic form, another constraint here. These are two huzzles, right? Indo-Arabic form. It's roughly 1,000 years old. Started as song, drifted into American literature, right? So we have two huzzles. Y'all know the rules for huzzles, right? Right, so I'll just go over them briefly. Basically, it's a series of couplets, okay? And at the end of every other line, there needs to be a word or a phrase that's repeated over and over again. So on this side, we have Burt Williams saying, "Nobody." That song that he was so famous for that he sang throughout his career. Now on this side, we have George Walker saying, "Face, face, face, face," every other line, right? Okay. So we have two huzzles, two stand-up comedians standing, right? Standing next to each other, trading lines, going back and forth, right? So I'd like to read through this with you, and y'all can follow along. You good for that? Sometime I got to take a poll sometime to see if y'all are still with me. Okay? But just follow along, and we'll make it through this paradox. Sing like me, Jonah in the charcoal hold of the whale, doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Just might be playing you for a fool. You see, this face be smiling till the crowd starts to cry. This nobody born to riddle all about race. A sure bet nobody born to riddle all about race. A sure bet nobody got them laughing loud like me. You think they mock my face? Can't help but see themselves just beneath my blacked up face. Might be saying, "Look at that handsome man." Nobody might be saying, "Look at that handsome man." Nobody wondering about Dark's pathos. Believe the human being swept up in my diamond stud strut. Bless those that get in touch from inside out. Every wide-eyed face getting touched from inside out. Every wide-eyed face being buried neath my ash. Don't claim that nobody holding secret smiles for another man's plight. A shame will be baptized clean. I want to make it so. Each face teared up in titters, then torn down sad. A soiled soul full of fret about humanity is masked on my face. Bird to sing fresh out of pain. I sing like nobody. Bird to sing fresh out of pain. I sing like nobody, full of bulging eyes. Cakewalking along to ragtime, getting blistered with spotlight. That's my mask, not my face getting blistered with spotlight. That's my mask, not my face struggling not to fade away. That's the role that I play, making folk double take what they see. I'm the straight man, crooning while coon songs paint my strife. They claim nobody yearning for tragic Negro to uplift them, to buck, filled with black magic. Don't tell me that ain't nobody teary when I mime a losing card game. I want them all grinned up. I stay sharp or I can't get nobody rolling in aisles each time. Have you seen their faces? Rolling in aisles each time. Have you seen their faces? Beyond the skin. Here in my show, they are me. They'll be clowning with minds freed up. They see me and soon they get living neath Quartz costume. My crowds got to face this face themselves. See, most crowds know nothing about nobody trying to rise up the race. We're two real coons, proud of rising through blackface. Some claim how we ain't nobody, changing the game a bit. We've made ourselves somebodies being sent here to ponder on pride. But we sweat cold, mind and joy out of hurt. That's better than nobody closing the curtain on coon shows. That is our mission, making theater about us. Plays of paradox, slowly erasing darky to dawn a human face. Doing the work we're born to do. See, we want to be doing the work we're born to do. See, we want to be working with the truth that smothers Jim Crow's stench. We are working with the truth that smothers Jim Crow's stench. We are free. We wake up to mirrors full of slick black faces, dead set to swagger into undeferred dream. Look, we're sure of the price, what our act's worth. Bet you nobody wise to the dark's risk. Outshine the crowd. I have each face sure of the price, what our act's worth. Bet you nobody reflecting how every live soul holds a dream. We're reflecting how every live soul holds a dream. We're free. We wake up to mirrors full of slick black faces, doing the work we're born to do. See, we want to be working with a truth that smothers Jim Crow's stench. We are telling real human comedies. That's us. Nobody making theater about us. Plays of paradox making theater about us. Plays of paradox closing the curtain on coon shows. That is our mission, closing the curtain on coon shows. That is our mission. Mind and joy out of hurt. That's better than nobody mind and joy out of hurt. That's better than nobody changing the game a bit. We've made ourselves somebodies being sent here to ponder on pride. But we sweat cold when we sophisticated sambos lie. We're that face trying to rise up the race. We're two real coons, proud of living neath Quark's costume. My crowds got to face this face themselves. See, most crowds know nothing about nobody beyond the skin. Here in my show, they are me. They'll be rolling in aisles each time. Have you seen their faces? All grinned up. I stay sharp, or I can't get nobody teary when I'm losing card game. I want them tickled with slapstick blackness. I'll color each white face tickled with slapstick blackness. I'll color each white face filled with black magic. Don't tell me that ain't nobody yearning for tragic Negro to uplift them, to buck, bent enough to snicker itself, or in white folks' faces, making folk double take what they see. I'm the straight man struggling not to fade away. That's the role that I play, getting blistered with spotlight. That's my mask, not my face, speaking low of my woe. Low fame don't hurt nobody, speaking low of my woe. Low fame don't hurt nobody atop of dancing darkness, shining hard. No, I'm not full of bulging eyes, cakewalking along to ragtime, full of fret about humanity. It's masked on my face, teared up in titters, then torn down sad. A soiled soul, remembering my tale, not hopeless but lonely. One remembering my tale, not hopeless but lonely. One will be baptized clean. I want to make it so. Each face holding secret smiles for another man's plight. Ashamed getting touched from inside out. Every wide-eyed face being swept up in my diamond stud strut. Bless those that being buried neath my ash. Don't claim that nobody being buried neath my ash. Don't claim that nobody wondering about dark's pathos. Believe the human might be saying, look at that handsome man. Nobody might be saying, look at that handsome man. Nobody got them laughing loud like me. You think they mock my face? Just might be playing you for a fool. You see this face? Just might be playing you for a fool. You see this face be smiling till the crowd starts to cry. This nobody just might be playing you for a fool. You see this face sing like me, Jonah in the charcoal hold of the whale, doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Doing justice to my juba jig. See how I dance? Okay, so that poem, just like the other one, there's 4 fold-out poems in the book, incidentally. I have to be honest, just a side note, when I sent this book to my publisher, and there are very few publishers in the United States that would ever do anything like this. Seriously. 4 fold-out pages, you can see it's 235 pages long, right? And all the pages that fold out are perforated so they tear out beautifully, right? It says, I want you to deconstruct the book, to deconstruct the text the same way that black folks have had to deconstruct the given text that they've been receiving and deconstruct them in order to further fully understand what is actually going on. Right? So, when you tear it out, okay, or maybe you can take it to a Xerox and put it down there, and then you can copy it and do it like that. But you see that the left side of the page has a coherent relationship with the right side of the page. Every line reads to the 5 lines around it. This line reads to this line, this line, this line, this line now. Right? I don't memorize how I go through these poems when I read them to you. It's all ad hoc. I just do it and make it up as I go along. Okay? I couldn't make... You think I could memorize all that? Seriously? So, also, every time you hit a period or a colon, the line becomes recursive and folds in on itself. Okay? But, why go through all that? Well, here you go. Here you have the poem taken out of the book. And of course, we have an XY axis, right? That's a plane, yes? A two-dimensional surface, much like a caricature, a flat depiction, right? Of our friends Bert and George, right? However, when you bring the two sides together, because they read into each other, right? Every line reads into the other line. Every side, one side reads into the other. You now have a construction such as this. So we've moved from a flat, two-dimensional depiction into a what? A cylinder. That's right, math class. It's Euclidean geometry. Didn't expect that in your poetry session, did you? Right? So here we go. We have a cylinder. We've moved from a flat depiction without depth to one with depth. That also happens with the top and the bottom. The top reads into the bottom, and the bottom reads up into the top. There you go. So once again, you have a cylinder. Yes? Right? Also, you can do both of those things at the same time. So, you fold it down to say jura, right? And then you bring both of the sides together, and now you have a shape that is known as a torus. Or some of y'all drove here in a car, and you're just like your tire. So it reads inside, forwards, and backwards. On the outside, forwards and backwards. And from the inside to the outside, and from the outside to the inside. Right? So now we've fully moved from a two-dimensional construction into a torus. Actually, this construction geometrically is called a flat torus. Right? Which we've developed into a full torus, right? And so now we have, just like our friends were trying to do, to come from this place where they were forced to make themselves caricatures with just a two-dimensional depiction without depth, taking that form and twisting it, and taking the rules of the minstrel show, enveloping them and twisting them in order to make a full depiction of oneself. There's one last thing, one last twist, one might say. Because our friends were working within a paradox. Yes? Going from inside the minstrel show and from that creating fully realized characters of the first independent African-American theater productions. So if you take that twist and give it one twist, right? Now you have what is called a Mobius strip. That reads from the inside to the outside, to the outside to the inside, over and over again, ad infinitum. Okay? Yes? About. So that is the Bert Williams George Walker paradox. I have how much time do I have? Well, I will continue to share a couple more poems. If y'all down for a couple stories. Okay. Thank you. Now, that was the paradox. There's also, as I said, an actual crown of sonnets that goes all the way through the book, from the very beginning all the way to the end. And it's kind of interspersed. It kind of defines the sections of the book. The crown of sonnets is for a group of, really, basically, they were roughly teenagers up to their mid-20s. And right after the Civil War, black folks ran in droves to get their education, to get their spelling and their arithmetic on. Because we knew that that was the key to maintaining our freedom. You would see schoolhouses with everybody from grandpa to the youngest grandchild just packed trying to get their learning on. This was true of some students that went to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. Fisk was founded in 1867. So these are folks directly out of slavery, right? Who went to get their education on. When they would go to school, after classes, they didn't have no internet, no radio, right? And there's another thing, it's hard for us to understand. I mean, it's an adjustment, but when you were listening to music back then, there was somebody playing the music directly in front of you, right? So when they wanted to hear music, what did they do? They sang. And what did they sing? They sang the songs that had been passed down to them from their mothers and fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers. Those were spirituals and what they called cabin songs. Okay? So here we have these students after classes in their dormitories, right, so to speak, singing. And then you also have a missionary guy who's from I believe he's from around Maine, the Maine, Boston area, all right? Comes down, and he's at this university, and he hears for the very first time, this is another thing that's hard, kind of a mental adjustment. Most people had not heard the sound of African American music at that time, right? Think about that. Because there's no place in the world you can go where ain't nobody, somebody hasn't heard Bob Marley, or Jay-Z, or Michael Jackson, or B.B. King, etc., etc. But this cat it was the first time he'd heard the sound of black music. He was entranced. He was overcome. He came to tears. And he approached me. He says, "Look, we should get a choir on. We should a group together, and with that group, tour around the world, tour around the country, around the world, and it's the Fisk Jubilee Singers. That's how the Fisk Jubilee Singers were born, right? And they were initially had a hard time, but they were eventually successful, and successful to the point that there were many Jubilee choirs that sprang up after the Fisk Jubilee Singers, right? Jubilee means what? Yeah, it does. It's in the Bible. It's every 49 to 50 years, debts are forgiven, slaves are freed, right? So that's where they got the word Jubilee from. So, I wrote a crown of sonnets, a heroic crown of sonnets for the lives of the very first 9 people, all right? And I had finished that crown of sonnets. Actually, this was actually the hardest part of the book, was doing this crown of sonnets. Because they were missionaries. It's very difficult to impart a sincere evangelical urge in 21st century America. You know what I'm saying? But that's what they were. They were missionaries. Not just of religion, but of the idea of black humanity. There's one story when they were at a train stop, and they were somewhere menacing and southern. They were at a train stop, and a crowd of white folks was starting to press them. And they knew that they were in danger. What they did was they broke out into song. And it so moved those folks that they just could not continue with their aggression. That's one small story about them. But I finished this crown of sonnets, and I realized that there was something gnawing at me. The book took 7 years to write. It's a long story, but finally I realized that the thing that was missing from the story of the spirituals was the other story that's attended to the black church, and that is the burning of black churches, from which the spirituals came. And it occurred to me that I knew that there had been burning of black churches, historically, bombing of black churches. But I did not know one single name of any church other than 16th Street Church in Birmingham. Right? That's the only one I knew. And it occurred to me that this is kind of a missing history. So what I did was I researched the history of as much as I could. I found as many names of burnt black churches. And in the index, you'll find this written. Excuse me while I find it right quick. On the Fifth Jubilee Choir, testifying through fire. The names of our burned and bombed black churches enfold the spirituals sung by our Jubilee Choir. Inside each flame burns hum, prayer, and holy book. Each hymn inhabits heat and smolder. Each biblical spark is kindled with story. There is no complete record of all such attacks upon the black congregational body. No complete accounting of all the pulpits, pews, and psalm books rendered into fire. These 148 stand in testimony to all the unnamed churches lost to arson and TNT. The slats and nails and sweat that doubled as schoolhouse and underground passageway. The pyres of pine and oak and cedar steeples that sheltered baptisms and homegoings. The silent crucifixions curled into ash. The AMEs and all the graces. The tabernacles and all the many firsts. The hand fans, tambourines, mourners' benches, and collection plates. They rise in smoke like the songs that soak through them and up to heaven's blued eternal door. So I researched all of the names of the churches, and I put them chronologically above and below each of the sonnets throughout the entire book. Okay. And I had finished this list in about 2015, in May or so of 2015. And then in June of that year, a man walked into a church in Virginia, in South Carolina, my fault, yes, and gunned down, prayed with the people for an hour, and then gunned down 9 people. And I called up the publisher. I said, the name of this book this church has to go in the book. They obliged. They were like, of course. Then I researched the history of that church, Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And it turned out it had been burnt to the ground in 1822, which made it both the first and the last church listed in this long list of churches, following the idea of a crown of sonnets, where the first line is the last line. I did not intend for that to happen, but that's what happened. So I'm going to leave this and I'm going to let you go. And thank you for your presence and your attention today. And leave you in poetry and history. This poem is dedicated to Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, 1822. To Cross Ankle Church in Palmetto, Georgia, 1899. To Greenleaf Presbyterian Church in Keeling, Tennessee, burnt to the ground in 1900. Red Top Church in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, 1915. First Baptist Church in Carteret, New Jersey, 1928. Fulton Street Methodist Church, Chicago, Illinois, 1927. Second Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan, my hometown, 1930. Macedonia Baptist Church in Egg Harbor City, New Jersey, 1935. Mount Methodist Church in Henderson, North Carolina, 1940. And Negro Methodist Church, Loganville, Georgia, 1947. The Fish Jubilee Proclamation with the epigraph from Psalm 96. O sing unto the Lord a new song. Oh, sing. Undo the world with blued song born from newly freed throats, sprung loose from lungs once bound within bonded skin, scored from dawn to dusk with coffle and lash, every tongue unfurled as the body's flag, every breath conjured despite loss we've had. Bear witness to the birthing of our hymn from storied depths of America's sin. Soul-worn songs, blessed in our blood through dark lessons of the past, struggling to be heard. Behold, the bold sound we found in ourselves that was hidden, cast out of the garden of freedom. It's loud and unbeaten, then soft as a newborn's face, each note bursting loose from human bondage. Thank you. Thank you.